This guy says, yeah, sure, but you'd be a madman. If someone was saying that they were God now, people would say they were a madman. They'd kill him. They killed him. And he said, what? They don't know that we believe he's the Son of God given for us.
So today we have Sean and Sarah Flack, who are here with us from America originally, but Dublin. The last 7 years for Sean and the last few years for Sarah. You're very welcome. Please tell us why you're here. Who is Sean and Sarah Flack first? Or maybe tell us why you're here.
Well, Tony, Sheena, thanks for having us. It's wonderful to be here. We both hail from the great state of Texas.
Woohoo.
And I came to Ireland 7 years ago with Focus, the Fellowship of Catholic University Students. Focus sends missionaries to work with college students. And so Focus serves at about 200 universities in the United States. And then 7 years ago, we were asked to come to Austria and then Ireland. So that's how I first came over here. Sarah, how did you get here?
Well, I came here because I married Sean. Well, Sean asked me to marry him. I was a Focus missionary myself. So yeah, Sean just explained a little bit about Focus, but we work on college campuses, and I was working as missionary on a college campus in Texas. I'd moved to Colorado and then ran into Sean. We started dating during COVID, and then the whole way through, he was telling me about his love for Ireland. And even on our third date, he was like, yeah, and I just love Ireland so much, and I just really feel like that's where the Lord is calling me. And I was like, well, that's wonderful. I'll see you later. We probably shouldn't date then, because yeah, I was not interested at all in moving to Ireland. But yeah, we continued dating, and ultimately God asked me to move to Ireland and asked me to marry Sean. So I've been here almost 2 years, going on 2 years in August. It's been a blessing.
Praise God. I have to say we're very glad that you're both here. I knew Sean for some time, and it's so good to finally meet his wife. We've heard so much about you, Sarah, and it's just really great to have you here on the podcast and in our home.
Especially from Breen and Maria. Like, we've heard loads about you.
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
Indeed. So Focus, what is Focus?
Focus, it's an acronym first. It stands for the Fellowship of Catholic University Students. So Focus exists to invite college students into a relationship with Jesus Christ and to train and equip them to invite others to do the same. Mm-hmm. So we go out. The norm is we'll send a group of 4 missionaries, 2 guys and 2 women, to be the hands and feet of the chaplain on a college campus. They go and we win students over in friendship. We invite them into understanding who Jesus Christ is, what his church is, what does it teach, and then we build them up and equip them to go and do the same with their friends. So that's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
I'd say too, it's interesting because there are so many great ministries that exist that put on really lovely retreats or put on even big conferences and so on. But Focus kind of saw that there were a lot of really good-hearted people who maybe had an encounter with Jesus at a retreat or a conference and wanted to take that next step of following him, but honestly didn't know how. And so Focus, the missionaries, our whole bread and butter is to live with our students and live with the people who have those encounters and then are like, yeah, I want to follow God. What do I do next? And we're there to be, just to be there the next day and to be like, okay, well, I'll teach you how to pray. And then tomorrow we'll do the same thing. And the next day we'll do the same thing. And
Great.
We'll examine sin in your life. And it won't just be this one-time experience of it, but I'm going to be with you here for years and God willing, a lifetime kind of walking with you through these things. So yeah, it's a really beautiful ministry because it's so day in and day out and kind of ordinary.
And you're working in Irish universities with Irish students.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we were invited 7 years ago to work in Dublin. So we have a team of 4 missionaries working in universities in Dublin and in Cork and in Belfast. So I mean, 3 teams of missionaries working in all those places. And I would add, just to clarify, to live amongst. We don't live in the same houses. Always with the people we
Okay.
serve,
Sure.
but
yeah.
we work on a college campus with them, and we're there every day. So our missionaries, the first thing they do is they're on the chapel on campus and they pray for a holy hour every single morning. Students are invited to that. So it begins, and they're going to see the students on campus every day. And yeah, you begin to share life. It's not that I'm just a teacher, or I put up a sign and you come to an event and I teach from an altar or from an ambo. No, I live amongst you. And we say we do the method modeled by the master. What did Jesus do? He spent most of his time with 12 people, and he spent it every single day with them. So this is the heart of what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Great. So if you were to consider success on a scale of 1 to 10, what would the 10 be in terms of the journeying that you're having? You know, you're talking about you pray day after day with a person.
Mm-hmm.
At what point do you say, I reached number 10 with this person?
That's a great question.
Yeah. We hope to prepare to not just help make faithful disciples of Jesus Christ, but fruitful disciples of Jesus Christ. So not that someone would make an ascent to Jesus in his church and begin to practice their faith, but that they would go on mission themselves, and not necessarily in a formal capacity as a focused missionary or as a priest or as a sister, but in life. So you can never give a number to people in fruitfulness, right? And we are broken. And what did it look like when St. Peter wasn't there at the cross and denied Jesus 3 times? So it's so hard to say for an individual person, or say, well, that person's a 6 or that person's a 1 or a 10. But what is a 10? When someone embraces Jesus Christ, gives their full life to them, and goes on mission to be what the Catechism says a disciple is.
Yeah.
Someone who not just believes, but also goes and shares their faith.
Wow, that's so good.
Yeah, there's, I think it's in 2 Timothy, but he talks about St. Paul's letter to Timothy is what I'm referring to, and he talks about teaching teachers how to teach, and that's our hope with Focus, right? That we are not just raising up, faithful people, but that we're raising up teachers who also teach other teachers how to teach, and so on. So
A virtuous cycle.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It all sounds a bit Protestant in an Irish context. And I'm
think
doing
it
this
is.
to provoke a reaction, not a reaction, but a response from you guys, because you talk about Jesus a lot. That's not very Catholic. You talk about following him, and you talk about this relationship thing that you talk about, Sean. Like, what is even that? Like, what does it mean to have a relationship with this Jesus guy you're talking about? And how is that Catholic?
Well, I'll first say Curtis Martin was the founder of Focus, and Curtis was a fallen Catholic. He went to college in Louisiana, and some other students befriended him. They invited him to play golf. They hung out with him, invited him to play basketball, and then they said, hey, do you want to come to a Bible study? He came, he encountered Jesus. He was a fallen Catholic, and his life was changed. He got really involved. By the time, if I remember Curtis's story best, by the time college ended, he was starting to study the church fathers, and he was going, oh, what I was brought up in, this is it, like the fullness. Okay, flash forward many years, he's like, there was no one on my college campus, Catholic, to reach out to me. There were
So were those people, they were
faithful
Catholic?
Christians, faithful Protestant
Okay,
Christians.
We were
okay.
Protestant Christians.
And so he's sitting there many years later going, what if there were Catholics doing the same thing, but giving what we have come to know and believe is the fullness of the truth? Same thing, inviting people into a relationship first with each other, that we become friends. Jesus went to people and invited them to follow him. It was real and tangible and hearty, and sometimes they said no in the midst of it. What if we did that? So
whenever you talk about a relationship with Jesus, you're talking about the same type of relationship that he had with his apostles, with his disciples. Is that what you're saying that we should have?
that's exactly what I'm saying we should have.
And even more, more, because Jesus invites us into, the reason that he came, right, is to present us to the Father. And so even more than we would have just like with a friend, even more of a relationship than we would just have with a friend, what we're talking about is something
Filial.
and supernatural to where we can't even explain the intimacy. The intimacy of the relationship of lovers and of friends and a parent and a child, and it's all of it.
It's alive, and that is what is so amazing and
What's
so dangerous. Jesus Christ. And this is what he says, it is better that I go to the Father and that I give you the Spirit. He says it is better, that there is more on offer for us. Mm-hmm. And that is hard to believe, and it's dangerous to believe. People would say you're crazy to believe it. It's what we've always believed as Christians. Mm-hmm. And it's what it means to be a Christian, to believe that Jesus, there's a lot behind that. The creed is what it means to be a Christian. There's a lot more to believe that Jesus is alive and active and changes concrete reality and knows me more than anyone else, more than I know myself, and invites me to know him.
I'm struck by two things. You mentioned a big word there, Sheena, filial. Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
Well, we're no longer, it's no longer friendship, it's sonship, and through baptism we become sons and daughters of God.
So it's a deep blood-like relationship almost?
Yeah, well, it's adoption, but it's
You two are actually studying the same course.
Yeah, we are.
At the Augustine Institute. That's interesting.
I'm like, oh my gosh, my retention is shocking, but I agree with you.
Yeah. And Sean, you act like this makes a difference in your life. Both of you act like this makes a difference in your lives. You seem happy for some reason.
It makes all the difference. I can't imagine that not being the case. We were talking earlier before we were recording about what's changed over the last 10 years and working with college students. And I said that the regular levels of anxiety in a young person today, as opposed to a young person 10 years ago, are much higher. Mm-hmm. That is real.
You see that on the street, on the campus.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm not going to pretend to say this is exactly why and give the one or two bullet points. But in a world that has no meaning, in a world that my actions have no meaning,
or no consequences,
I came from nothing and I'm going to nothing. That's anxious. That makes me anxious. What is it?
And the gospel's written on your two faces. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm trying to say, but I wasn't saying it very well. It's written on your faces, and your witness alone of how you look at each other and how you look individually is a testament to who it is that you believe in. Mm-hmm. And that's just, Sean, I've known you for 5 or 7 years, as long as you've been here. And Sarah, we just met you tonight, and it's in you. There's clearly something different about you.
Yeah, it's truth and beauty. Thank you. You know who you are, and you know you're loved.
Yeah, absolutely. Clear. Yeah, it's interesting. Like you were saying, Tony, you were like, this doesn't sound very Catholic. And actually, whenever I was first kind of coming into my relationship with Jesus, I was blown away, particularly by the saints and the witness of the saints, which is, by the way, extremely Catholic, right? That we have that tradition, with us since Jesus walked this earth. There have been these faithful people whose lives have become an example for us. But throughout the years, the Middle Ages and the mendicants and, all throughout all of church history, there are people who have actually compiled instruction on prayer, instruction on living a holy life, instruction on sanctity, on just on everything, on the Mass and so on. So as I was coming into my own conversion, I was like we said earlier, so many people are I want this. I want to be faithful, but I don't know how. And I don't even know how to take that first step. And what I found in our Catholic faith is that here here were years and years and years of people who have gone before me and who have done it and who were offering me just like that one step further. And I started to look at some of the things that they had in common too. And so many of the saints had this devotion to the Eucharist, which is, again, extremely Catholic. We can go into that later. But it is, I think, the reason for what you're saying when you say, like, it's written all over your faces. I'm like, well, God willing, because we're trying to live these Eucharistic lives where, like, we're trying to behold Jesus every day in the Eucharist, be looked upon by him. And I'm just realizing kind of now that changes me. Like, it changes me so much in a way that I can't even comprehend. Like, I am being changed, even if honestly my prayer time right now looks a little snoozy. You know, I'm just kind of snoozing because we have a young baby who takes a lot of attention. But yeah, I just become so grateful for all of that, for the saints, for the Eucharist, and then just for the real reality of Jesus in the sacraments who changes me completely.
Yeah. I think.
Can we pause for a second? I think I hear a baby crying.
We're Sarah, we stumbled upon the tradition of theology that's in Ireland, and Sean
lovely.
was saying, you know, you guys have a perspective because you're the head of Focus, not just in Ireland, but you also run Focus in some of the colleges in Germany and Austria.
I oversee
mostly
it.
Europe is,
Yeah, I oversee.
So it's a big job you have, and so you see faith perspectives in different cultures, not just the American culture, but also German, Austrian, Irish. And, you know, what would be the most salient point that you would say you could relate in relation to the Irish culture, the church within the Irish culture? That's two different questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I would say that my first impressions of the Irish faith, first of all, whoa, like I had traveled abroad like many times, but then when I got here, I was like, this is the Irish Catholic Church. It felt like its own, it felt different, but it felt the same because Catholic, right? It means universal. So it felt the same, but it also felt particularly different and what my impressions are that the Irish are penitents. Like, they have this very penitential kind of spirituality, like the ability even to fast, this real like celebration of death and mourning. And like, it was something that struck me immediately when I got here. And I was like, Sean, what is this? You know, Americans, we're just all, you know, celebrate everything. But here it just felt more
interesting.
And it's
good
great.
serious.
It's a good, yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, we do death well.
Death.
We do funerals really well in Ireland. Like,
Yes.
wakes are a thing that are dying out in the country, but it's such a cathartic thing. My dad died 5 years this year.
Mm-hmm.
The house was private, but even those who got past the gates, it was a massively healing for me, you know, to just sympathize, for people to sympathize with me about my dad, and, you know, and same for the rest of the family. It was, it was a big thing. But you mentioned something earlier on before the death thing.
They're penitential. Lochderg.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, what? People do this on their own volition. Go to a small island and take off their shoes and eat toast and water for. I was like totally taken aback, like that. You couldn't pay me to do that.
Can I just say, put a caveat on there, or put a question on that? As long as we're not doing it to buy God's favor.
Sure.
As long as we're doing it to get close to God.
Sure.
And sometimes the two motivations can be confused. What would you say to that, Sheena?
When I did Lochder years ago, buying God's favor wasn't even a concept for me. It was, you know, I want to step out of my life. I want to be in a space where I can hear God's voice. And in order for me to really connect it was better for me for it to be hard. Because it's hard.
Yes.
And there's no sleep.
And I understand that. And for some reason, I do think that the Irish are like, I'm closer to God when I'm suffering. Or like they're
interesting, yeah.
Aren't we all though? You know, C.S. Lewis
Sure.
says that, you know, God whispers to us in our joy. He talks to us in our everyday, but he has a megaphone when we're suffering, you
Absolutely.
know? And you know, God's megaphone is suffering, and it's not that he gives us suffering, but when suffering comes along, he's going to use it. And when we're able to fast, he can use that. He can get through to us really, really clearly. In my personal experience, and not that I fast regularly or well, but I suffer.
Yes.
Something you had said earlier, Sarah, about the lives of the saints struck me that, you know, like recently we've been reading a good bit about the lives of the saints, Saint Catherine of Siena, Saint Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Francis de Sales. But I would think that stuff's quite intense and heavy. So like for, you know, from the point of view of people starting off on their journey and trying to say, okay, well, I've had this conversion experience, you know, like you were saying,
What
that
next?
yeah.
I've been told a few times I'm intense.
Okay. So it was good for you.
It was good.
Yeah.
It was good for me, but I think it's a treasure for everyone, for the entire church.
Yeah.
What do you think? Because Sean has a completely different personality than I do.
Isn't this the amazing thing about Saint Therese specifically?
Totally.
The little flower.
Well, there you go.
150 years. She's not that far from us. We have pictures of her dressing up as Saint Joan of Arc. She wanted to be like the saints, and yet she was quiet. She lived in a small convent, and she said, I'm going to give my entire self to God in these small, tiny ways. She didn't lead wars. She didn't offer herself like St. Maximilian Kolbe at the concentration camp. She didn't forego, is it Gianna Molla, who's, you know, who's about to have a baby, and they're saying, you know, you can abort the baby. And Gianna Molla makes this great act of sacrifice and saves her baby. And she just gave God everything in the small, regular, daily aspect. So all the saints are amazing, and they all give something different to the church. She gives something for everyone.
Yes. And I suppose my point is that, you know, like now that I'm reading them, I'm like, this stuff is amazing. And, you know, we were reading Augustine's Confessions, and like my perspective was like, no, it's too lofty, it's too intellectual. But it was so real. It was so personal that I was like, why am I 54 and I'm only reading this stuff now? Yeah. You know?
And also, you know, tell me if I'm wrong, but let me ask the question. What if somebody's new to their faith and they don't get the lives of the saints, but they want to continue on this journey with Jesus who saved them?
Start reading the Gospels and read them every single day and open them like you don't know what's in them, because you don't. There are treasures and treasures in there. What Jesus says and does, how his apostles respond, how other people respond is amazing. And it changed the whole world. Everything we are sitting on in Western tradition is based on that. And we're so ignorant to deny it, but it's not blaming anyone in particular.
Sure. So let me further clarify the question by asking, can you be Catholic and not dig the saints, for want of a better way to put it? I think you can. I think you're missing out.
Exactly.
Yeah. But that's not the point. You can still be Catholic and not have a relationship, say, with the saints.
Sure.
You know,
sure.
or not be reading the saints. You can read the Gospel, start there, and don't beat yourself up if you don't get anything out of reading the lives of the saints.
Sure.
I don't see why you wouldn't, but that's okay. That's okay. Like it's you go where the Lord is leading you, and He's not going to lead you away. If you're going to Mass, receiving the sacraments, you're reading the Gospels, you're developing a relationship with Jesus in prayer, and you know, everything else will come from that. You know, he's going to introduce you to his friends, you know, but
I agree.
you mightn't be ready yet.
I agree. But the question earlier about, is that Protestant? Is that Catholic? The most Catholic thing is to stand up on the shoulders of those who've gone before us.
Yes.
And that's the most filial thing. I actually come from something, a family. And also I think modern society, we've lost that too. And unfortunately break down a family and other things. And often people don't come from a structured family or that's broken. And that's not to belittle anyone. That's real experience that we have all experienced or we know people who have experienced. But we've then lost the idea that I actually stand on the shoulders of those who've gone before me. And I think that's very Catholic. So we can, it's okay. It's okay to not know your mother or your father and to live a fulfilling life or to not know your cousins or your brothers or your sisters. But how much more full is it when that is the norm? And that's what the lives of the saints, those who've gone before us.
So
very well said.
Very well
Sean.
said. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it's so good. So you guys are from a different country. You're from America. You've traveled Europe.
Texas.
Texas.
We're
Yeah,
from
even
Texas.
better. You're from the Donegal of America.
Texas is different to America. It's a whole
Exactly right.
yeah.
We don't tell anyone
Yeah.
we're from America. We're from Texas.
Myself and Sheena lived in Texas in Austin, Texas for a couple of years. So the question I would ask you is, I was in conversation with 3 guys at the weekend, and Irish fellas, pretty smart guys, but they couldn't tell me what it meant to be Irish. They couldn't tell me what Ireland was. What would you say from the outside? What is Ireland? Like, what does it mean to be Irish?
Isn't that the question that everyone's asking right now? And I think Ireland, especially from an American perspective, it was always Irish Catholics. That was always, those two words went hand in hand. You didn't say one without saying the other. We'd be fooling ourselves to just say that today. I think a short answer that a lot of people will give, or maybe some people who would listen to the podcast would say, well, it's exactly the opposite of that. It's anti-Catholic. What does it mean to be Irish today? I think this will partly go to this anxiety.
Don't be afraid to offend us, Sean.
Is confused right now is the reality, because there is no identity and it's not tied to the past. And this is what's happening, obviously, in a lot of places in the West. But we're saying what we were, no more.
Yes.
That's bad. I'm going to cut all ties with this family tree. I'm Irish. Everything they came for, let's cut all ties. And now I'm an individual. And Pope Francis talks about this. He says, when modern secular culture does this and separates you from everything you're a part of, there's a vacuum. And it's going to be filled with something else. And that's the reality. We're spiritual beings. And it's going to be filled with something else.
It's funny, Matt Fradd said exactly the same thing, that, you know, Ireland has lost sight of who they were. And, you know, you asked the question of, like, what advice would you give to the church in Ireland? It's like, go back to your roots. Go back to the giants that you stood on. Remember that?
I mean, yeah.
Sarah, ask you the same question. You're not here as long as your husband.
Not at all.
Like, what would you say? You know, what would you say? Like that, we want Ireland to be Irish and Catholic. We recognize that Ireland is Irish and pagan for the most part, but we don't. We can say that without pointing the finger, and just recognize the laws that we've passed in the last few years.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, it is. The reality is we're sacrificing children, and so on and so forth. What we want it to be, and what it is, and what it appears to be to you. What does it appear to be to you?
You know, I don't know if I can really answer that question. I mean, at least living where we do right now in Dublin, it feels like the New York of Ireland. So it feels extremely international and, yeah, like any big bustling, I don't know, city in, you know, Europe. But So I'm not really sure. Like, I can't really answer, but what I can say is that I think what you're asking, like, I don't know, this might be kind of like left field, but when I think about what it means to be Texan, because this is like, if you were to ask me, like, what does it mean to be Texan? Like, the image that comes to mind is like the home of the Texas Hill Country that only Texans maybe like can have a real appreciation for. Like, I think people can come to Texas and be like, oh, it's beautiful and there's this part of your culture and that, but like, it's in me, like it's home. And we were just driving around today here in Donegal, and like, I've talked with Brian and Maria so many times, and the way that they describe the land, like this island and the land that's been cultivated, you know, for generations, and we're passing the farms and the sheep, and like, I don't know really what it means in a political sense to be Irish, but I think the land has something to do with it, and like their appreciation for it, and they're like, oh, it's a part of them in a way that like I can come and admire it and you know, have a great love for the Donegal countryside. But I think to the Irish particularly, they're like, this is mine. I don't know. I don't really know how to explain it.
It's home, isn't it?
Home, yeah.
I would love to know though, you know, when you, Sean, had said to Sarah, I just love Ireland.
Oh my goodness.
What is that Ireland that you loved? Or what was it about it?
The Irish are simple in the best of ways. Mm-hmm. And there's always, in anything, there's going to be a shadow side too. But Americans, we are excessive. Things are bigger. We have big cars and big houses, and I'm not belittling. There's plenty of people who live in poverty and don't have all of those things. But America is excessive. Everything is to the max. And that's not the reality here. And obviously Ireland experiences a prosperity today that it hasn't always in the past. But people don't live the same. Although capitalism, not just capitalism, I'd say consumerism is the word I would use, has taken Ireland in a bad way. It is nowhere close to America. Go shopping in America and see the throwaway culture on a whole nother level. I love the simplicity of the Irish people. And the Irish do look after the lowliest. They really do. And America is an amazing place. I'm from Texas. Texas is an amazing place.
We agree.
There is so much good there, and it's the wild, wild west. You make your own dinner, and you eat your own dinner, and we don't always look after the lowliest. And that is something about Ireland that is amazing. And sometimes I would say in modern culture, the Irish can get fooled into who is the lowliest. We all can get fooled, and false care has happened.
Yeah, you spoke a lot when we were dating, at least, about like modesty that the Irish have, like both in their like demeanor, like not wanting to ever appear better than thou, and that is especially coming from the States where like everyone's out to make their name, you know. But here to say like I'm no better than my neighbor, you know, or that was really beautiful. But also we've just been talking about this, and we're like, we don't exactly know why, but it seems like doors have just kind of swung open for Sean particularly and his work here. And I'm like, maybe the reason that you love it is simply because God has called us here, like our family here. And I can't even like really put words to it, but it's so mysterious. It is actually so mysterious how many doors have swung open, how well Sean feels integrated in this country. Like he understands the language and the who's who and the people, and he's getting quite connected these days. Just like, I guess, work-wise, but I mean, socially too. We have great friends. And I think that's kind of just so surprising. Like, yeah, God's finger is there, you know?
Yes. Well, we've met you. It's not surprising. You're great people. Like, really. And, you know, why wouldn't that happen? Yeah.
Thanks.
Sheena, next question.
So what has it been like, to move all the way over here and be a new mum in a different country and not have your familial support? Has that been difficult?
It's a sensitive question.
Oh, well, just for those who
Sure.
might be listening who have had similar experiences, it might be good to just
Sure. I'd love if anyone has done this before.
Yeah.
I would love to find you and
Yeah.
talk. No, it's been very difficult. It's been very, very difficult. But this is my cross. So it's not arbitrary suffering, and it's also not coincidental. But this is the cross of my life right now. And so I've just felt really reassured and encouraged by the Lord to meet him under the cross and to, I think, I think that maybe for anyone who's newly married and had a baby and moved in a year and a half or so, it would be a lonely experience. So I know I'm not the only one, but it's easy for me. I'm quite melancholic, so I really get along with the Irish there. But I can get kind of preoccupied with like, well, am I suffering enough? Or like, where is the suffering in my life? And it's been really reassuring to pray through that. And it's been kind of validating to look at this and be like, this is hard. And that's okay. And it's supposed to be.
And to recognize that it is hard actually helps
Yeah.
as well. And, your suffering may in some way contribute, maybe not to Sean's work or the work of the missionaries on campus, but
yes,
maybe somebody on
yeah.
their deathbed somewhere
Yeah.
will have a deathbed conversion because you've won the grace. There's
Yeah.
nothing lacking in the cross of Jesus Christ. But
That's
St.
right.
Paul mentions, that to make up that which is lacking in the cross of Jesus Christ. In other words, our response to Jesus' suffering
Yes.
isn't always what it should be. And somehow God will use your suffering to go the extra mile for somebody who, doesn't merit it themselves.
Right. It's mysterious, isn't it?
Just
But I also think that, it's a bit like, the way that Focus works is that you bring guys through that experience so that they can bring others through that experience. And I think often the Lord uses experiences like your suffering so that you'll see it in somebody else. And before you would never have known, right?
Yeah.
So he can use you now to help others who, may have moved here and don't know anybody. And so I really do think he can turn that situation into a learning
Absolutely.
experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would say as well, you have a great empathy for young mums. There's a lot of couples who have moved to Ballybofey because of the faith that's here in the local parish. And you have a lot of empathy because you were like Sarah, you were not from Texas, but you were from Mullingar, which is a long way away by Irish standards. And, you're able to help young mums and,
Yeah, it was hard. It was definitely hard. And I think also when you're coming from working and being successful in your job, and I guess, for me, there was probably identity issues in there as well. But the key thing was accepting, okay, this is my role now. This is where the Lord has me now. And it's that craving for the old life, isn't it? And, once I kind of let go of that, but that's not to say I let go of myself, right? It's just like, okay, this is a new normal.
Yes.
It's never going to be the old normal.
Yeah, it's quite existential, this whole experience.
It is. It is.
yeah, and God is going to make you holy through it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's easy for me to say because I'm not suffering in the way that you're suffering.
Sure.
But God makes you holy. Now, he's a long way to go, and I have to suffer a lot.
Yeah.
But it's like he's able to get to us in a way that we're more open through the existential crises that come along.
Oh, it's so true. And we've been like, this is so silly. It can sound so silly, but we're applying for Sean's citizenship right now. Hopefully I can share that.
It's all good. It's perfectly legal.
So
Normal.
he's applying for his citizenship right now, and we've been applying for Mary's. She was born in Dublin, and I've just been thinking, I think through, what does it mean to be a citizen of a place? What does it mean to come from a place, to belong? All of these huge existential questions. I'm from Texas, but I haven't lived there in several years. Who am I? Where did I come from? Right. And I have just been praying and thinking more than ever about my death and about how I want to be a citizen of heaven. That has been Sean's asking me all the time, well, what will we offer this for or that for? Just small little fasts around the house. And I'm like, for my death? In reparation for my sin, because I want to go to heaven. I don't know, but that has been the theme, I guess, in terms of all these existential big questions. I'm like, there really is only one home, right? And it's definitely not here on earth. So it's been bizarre, but exactly what you're saying, it's moving me. It's really putting into perspective, everything in this life comes and goes and ebbs and flows. And please, God, I just want to be in heaven at the end of it all, right? Please.
Amen. Amen. And you've come, we do death well here. So if you do end up staying here, we'll bury you really well.
I know you will.
Yeah.
And you'll remember me on my anniversary. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we'll wake you and we'll pray for your soul.
Yes, you will.
And I'm sure you'll do that in America as well. But we seem to do it we do it really well here.
Yes.
Yeah. But not to keep going on about the course that we're doing, but one of the books that we're reading is Gary Grew Lagrange. Hard mouthful to say.
Did you read it, Sean? Honestly?
Of course he did. Anyway, moving swiftly along.
Please keep going.
Yes, he talks about the fact that, in the Gospels, Jesus says, the kingdom has come, and that, so he says, we are already living eternal life now because we have the seed of eternal life within us.
By our baptism.
By our baptism. Yeah, that just blew me away.
And this is it. We'll go back to it. You're saying, you're poking, but you're saying language we're using as Protestant. Catechism of the Catholic Church begins, one quote, the prologue, John 17:3, Father, and this is eternal life, that they would know you, the one true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you sent. Catechism begins, filial, Father. That's the language it's used. And then eternal life, it's knowing Jesus Christ. That's what it is. So for us to think it's just some moralist game, we're lost.
Yeah. And I totally get you. And there's a reason I'm saying it, and I want you to say things in response to questions that I've been asked as somebody who's worked in mission over the years. And, I've been asked in meetings with parish pastoral councils more than 3 or 4 times, please stop using the word evangelization. That's a Protestant word, and it makes me feel uncomfortable. And it's and using the name of Jesus out loud to express our faith is something that can confront people's own faith in a way that can make them feel really edified or really uncomfortable, depending on their disposition and their perspective and where they're at in relation to sin in their life. Because His name cuts through.
Yeah, if I'm completely honest here, before our net days, before we were actively involved with net ministries, I do remember people who had been involved in ministry for a long time, and they spoke like that. They spoke about Jesus and, the Lord asked me to do this, or I feel the Lord's come. And I was like, what are they talking about? Because I couldn't relate. I couldn't speak that language. And
how did it make you feel?
Uncomfortable. It literally made me feel uncomfortable. And it's, and I do remember we had somebody on staff a few years ago who came from a different country, and she felt lonely here because nobody spoke like that. Right? So she felt she had to dumb it down.
Texas, was that the country she came from?
No, it wasn't. I don't want to say it because it'll give it away. But I often think back to that time, we speak like that now because it's normal for us. But sometimes it's not about that you don't feel that way. It's just not part of your vernacular.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, but also words put flesh on bones, and they actually give an appearance to a skeleton which makes it more palpable for people to relate to. So whenever we talk about, and it's not that I'm doubling down. Yeah, we're here to be honest. Yeah. What I would say is, like, Sean and Sarah are hitting at a core of our faith, and that is that which we believe in, and we're called to be in relationship with the Son of God. And for the Catholic Church in Ireland, there's a reason why it's on the decline. Attendance is on the decline, and so on and so forth. And this is not to stand on the grave and jump up and down and say, hey, look, this is for us to look back as adults and to also look forward as adults and say, okay, the faith that people have been handed in Ireland, if they've been handed a faith at all, is a fraction of the faith that they could have been handed, and it's not the fullness. And this is not American exceptionalism that I'm talking about. This is the Catholic faith, which is worldwide, and it's for all of us. And that which made us feel uncomfortable is actually just our Catholic faith, and expressed in a way that we didn't have the ability to express as Irish Catholics, because it wasn't given to us, and it's not part of our vernacular, but that's the fullness of our faith. And it's not because you're American, it's because that's our faith. And you don't have a particular brand of theology that's exclusive to America. That's just the Catholic faith, and we haven't been able to express that for some time. But we have in the past, but somehow we've lost that ability. We've had a muscular faith in Ireland that you do the thing, you practice your faith, but you don't talk about it. You talk about football. Yeah. You talk about the horses. Mm-hmm. You talk about the weather, but you don't talk about your faith. And because of that, we haven't the ability to hand on the faith because we don't know how to talk about it.
Interesting.
And the catechism is very clear. We actually have to share our faith.
You mean St. Francis? You're contradicting St. Francis?
Not just the catechism, like the Gospels.
No, completely, absolutely. But why I reference the catechism is this is the document of the church to say, what does it mean?
Let me first of all, before you say what you're going to say, attribute to St. Francis that which he didn't say, but which people, I actually heard a talk recently which somebody gave where they referenced St. Francis saying this, proclaim the gospel always and use words if necessary. St. Francis did not ever once say that, but we fight against that notion all the time. And it is something that we don't have to talk about Jesus all the time, but we have to talk about him sometimes.
Oh, absolutely.
The odd time.
And especially, like, one of the things that we've learned in Focus, a part of our training, or that something we heard at our training, especially in terms of handing down the faith to your children. Apparently there was a big research kind of poll, I guess, done in the States. And actually, Sean, why don't you share it, because you know a little bit more of the details.
Well, there's one study done from a group, I think based out of Notre Dame in Indiana, and they looked at Catholic students who practiced their faith in college. What was their experience before that in the home? Was it that they went to Mass on Sunday? Was it that their family prayed the rosary? Was it that they went to a Catholic school? And the single biggest reason for why they practiced their faith in college was they had spiritual conversations in the home.
So it's exactly what you're saying. Like, not just...
They didn't just have an experience. They had to put flesh to it. They had to put flesh on the bones.
About it, yeah.
And so it became much more real. And it's dangerous when it's not. I'd been here 6 months, and I met a student on campus, actually in UCD, and we're having a conversation, and then he finds out that I'm a Catholic and a Catholic missionary. He says, wow, I think that's so cool. I go to Mass every Sunday. So that's really cool. Not a lot of 20-year-olds are excited to tell me that. and the abortion referendum was coming, and he said, I'm pro-life, and that's really important to me. So great. Our conversation continued, and I was just asking about his life and everything. And then I said, well, what do you think about the nature of God and who God is? And he said, I've never thought about it. And I said, no, I'm not your teacher. This isn't a class. I'm not asking you. I'm not trying to pull out a catechism for the right answer. What do you think about who God is? And he said, never thought about it. And that is dangerous. When we get so stuck in whatever the structures are that we're not pointing people to God, which is what it all is.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It took missionaries to come along, and we were in our 30s for me certainly personally, and like we don't have to agree on this. We can have different answers to this question, but that was what attracted me to net missionaries to begin with, because they were able to express their faith in positive terms, and also they talked about who God was. And so we work with people not just from North America, Canada. We work with people from all around Europe and from Africa as well. Everybody is better able to express their faith than the Irish. And that's a fact. That's just my experience over the years with and that's not to down the Catholic Church. That's not to down Irish people. That's just, would you disagree with me if you disagree?
No, I don't disagree with you. But to make one more point about the words given to St. Francis of Assisi, maybe to some degree in some context that's true. Obviously, we have to be virtuous. Really? My life should embody Jesus Christ. That is way more important than me saying the exact words. Mm-hmm. But in 2024 in the Western world, I better declare with my mouth what we believe, because people don't know. I'm there leading a Bible study with Irish students, and this guy says, yeah, sure, but you'd be a madman. If someone was saying that they were God now, people would say they were a madman. They'd kill him. This guy's 22 years old. He's in Ireland, went to an Irish school, Catholic school his whole life. And I said, well, that's what they did. Yeah. They killed him. And he said, what? They killed him? They don't know. They don't know Jesus Christ. They don't know that we believe he's the Son of God given for us.
And they don't know that he died for us either.
It's never been explained.
Yeah.
And that's unfair. Many people are trying hard to explain that. There's many wonderful teachers. But we need to recognize the realities that many people here do not know the faith. And they have not been given, and they've been given a watered down version. Very
much, and inoculated against the true religion that is the Catholic faith. Yeah.
Inoculated is the right word.
Yeah. And so we could very easily be accused by people who are listening to the podcast. You guys are full-time missionaries. We're full-time missionaries. Like we can hang our hats on the fact that we actually proclaim the gospel. You guys through the missionaries, through Focus, the mission that you do, and Sheena and I through, we do some stuff here. We work with NET, and we're training young people to actually train the missionaries. But it goes beyond that for us, because when you're on the bus and you're having a conversation with somebody in Dublin, and when I'm, I have conversations like this all the time. Like this is not an unusual thing for me to be having, maybe not to the same depth, but we're in the steam room. I'm in the steam room, and it's where I go sometimes just to get away. And this stuff comes up, it just happens. I was in the barber this week, and my usual barber, who's a Muslim, wasn't there. And so the guy who was there to replace him, I was like, oh, I'm sorry that Samir isn't here. We usually have very deep philosophical conversations. And I didn't say it quite that way, but I was like, oh yeah, we talk about the meaning of life. And he's like, oh, yeah. And this guy's whatever, he's Polish. And I'm like, so what is the meaning of life to you? And he thought about it for a while, and he said, God. And I'm like, happy days. and so he's telling me about his life, and he's living with his girlfriend. They have a child, and I wasn't going to tell him to get married, but I said, why aren't you married? And let his answer speak for itself. He says, my mother tells me all the time, that I need to get married. And I'm like, do you go to mass? He says, I go sometimes. I go to tell my sins, and I'm like, good on you. And I said, you're not far from the kingdom of God yourself, you know. But like, I know enough to know not to say to him the things that are obvious to me that he should do in his life that would actually help him. But I'm asking him the questions that he knows the answer to, that his mother is telling him that he should actually do. And, you know, what is marriage to you? He's afraid that his marriage will, you know, if he marries, that somehow that will jinx his relationship with his girlfriend and so on and so forth. And I can say, no, it won't, and all the rest. But I'm having the conversations. This is not unusual for me at all to have these conversations. And it's like, it's not that risky. And I'm not insulting people by having the conversations.
What do you think, Sarah?
It's risky.
It's very risky.
It's so risky.
Yeah.
We have the same conversations, I think, with a focus mission with missionaries. Part of our walking with students, we ask them particularly about chastity, sobriety, and excellence in their lives. And when you're asking a college student about these things, you're prepared for all kinds of responses. But I guess maybe it's risky for us because we're like walking with them every day. We become friends with them, and like we're getting to know them. And you know, in some cases, we've been to their childhood home and met their significant other, their boyfriend or girlfriend, and then we're like, hey, let's talk about this. What does sobriety look like in your life? When was the first time you were exposed to alcohol? When's the last time that you were drunk? But doing all this, I think like you're saying, it's such an important conversation to have. And we really try to do it from a place of love. And I always tell the women that I'm working with, like, I'm asking you these questions because nobody asked me when I was in college. And I was begging for someone to ask me these questions when I was in college, and no one did. And so I want to ask you, how can I help? How can I accompany you in this? Do you want accountability and so on? But oh my goodness, that's our missionaries. Like, they have to really gear themselves up to have those conversations. It takes so much courage.
They do. And exactly. I think there is risk. Everything about the Christian life has risk in it. Mm-hmm. And that is what we have dumbed down to. Yeah. Is that, again,
but no, I just think nobody's hit me yet.
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry.
That's true. No, it's not what we think. True. People, I say, well, we have missionaries and they work with college students on college campuses and they invite them into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ and his church. And surely there's people spitting on you. And it's like, no, I've done that. I did that before I stepped into this role as a regional director for 8 years. Maybe I can remember one argument with these two guys who just wouldn't have it. That's it. 8 years. In person, when you become human, it's hard for people to really hate you in a human way.
They can online.
That's true.
Yeah, they can online. Absolutely, they can online. People are way more open.
Courageous.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think actually people respect you for, giving your opinion on something that's as far out there as believing in God, and then saying, well, actually, I've saved sex for marriage, or, we're living a chaste life, or we're actually following the church's teaching when it comes to our sexuality within our marriage. Mm-hmm.
I need to pray for more courage, obviously, because I'm definitely not bold in. I think I have a different approach rather than being like asking those direct questions. It's more like bringing people alongside me,
Both and.
Yeah, and both
and also, Sheena, don't beat yourself up. It's
no, I'm not beating myself up. I'm just saying that there are lots of ways of doing things,
Yeah. So Sarah, you had a life before you got married to Sean Flack. What was that like?
Well, I was missing my better half. No, it was great. I worked as a teacher in Colorado for a few years. I was a focus missionary right out of college, then worked as a primary school teacher for a few years, and then moved here to Ireland. So,
what sort of primary school was it?
So it was a classical school, which I think this is on the rise everywhere. I mean, I've definitely heard murmurs of classical schools here in Ireland. I think in Cork they
There
have
is,
something
yes.
starting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the school that I worked in, it was affiliated. It was a charter school, meaning that it was open to like the public, which brought in just a wide demographic, which I was really attracted to that particularly.
Was it publicly funded?
It was, yeah.
Wow.
And so the students could essentially apply for like a lottery system, and then they were selected to come into the school or not. And a classical school is basically, it's kind of a liberal arts school, but grounded in the Western tradition and with a lot of emphasis on Latin and Greek, like the classics, and then also, Aristotelian philosophy. So that was kind of the ethos. Of
Yeah,
school.
interesting. So we're not big on that in Ireland, and there might be one school, so when you say you learn Latin and Greek, what's the point in that?
Oh, I mean, it's probably the cornerstone for like all of the
All
languages,
are based on Latin, or a lot of them are.
Right, exactly. So I know that was like a really big piece of it.
And then you're talking about Aristotelian philosophy, if I can get that spoken correctly.
Yeah.
Like what have you learned from studying Aristotle?
Oh goodness. So you're asking a question that's above my pay grade, because I was still learning as a teacher. Like my goal was to stay like 2 steps ahead of my students. But Aristotle particularly talks about the virtues. And so our school really taught that people are a body soul composite, that humans have a body and soul and emotions and passions and an intellect, and that all of these things are supposed to work in harmony together. And then this idea of virtue, right, that we acquire these habits, whether they're good habits or bad habits. Virtuous habits are those habits that lead us toward our true end, right, which we would say is God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And wasn't it Aristotle that gave us the 4 cardinal virtues? Am I right in saying that?
I'm not sure.
I think we build off of
I think we do. Yeah.
at least the Greeks, probably Aristotle specifically.
And you mentioned, what are the 4 cardinal virtues?
Justice, prudence, fortitude, and temperance.
Temperance, self-control.
Yeah.
And then Sean, you mentioned something about like a component of temperance. Is it magnanimity? Or is it temperance or courage? Courage.
No, fortitude.
So a sub-virtue of fortitude is magnanimity, which translates to greatness of soul.
Yeah. What does that mean?
It's a wonderful, wonderful sub-virtue. Everyone should look it up. And there's a wonderful book written by a great Catholic man named Alex Havard on this. I think it's just titled Magnanimity. Everyone should read that book too.
I read it. Alexander de Havard. I met him actually as well.
Okay.
Russian guy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, and to say what it means, but also to tie it in with the school Sarah taught at, they would, the final years in secondary school, they would all write an essay on someone who embodies greatness of soul. And so the people will be writing about great historical figures, secular and religious, who have sub-virtue of fortitude, courage, who've gone through with the greatness of soul, with the highest of desires, and had to live it and fight through courageously, magnanimously, as opposed to the opposite of magnanimity is pusillanimity, which is a smallness of soul. That actually I wouldn't have great desires, that I wouldn't believe that God could do great things for me, and that actually I would just say, no.
Just shirking away.
I'll just shirk away, and I'll just cower away and do this. And so it's really fun because the students at her school, a couple of them get picked. The best essays get picked, and then they give this speech to end their school at the end of the year about a magnanimous person. All this is wrapping up in what is education meant for? It's to make us virtuous, to make us whole, so that I can be more human. By the way, God became human, and he teaches me the fullness of how to be human, and I can be more whole. That is what the virtue is for. It's for me.
More of yourself.
More of myself. That's what makes this sort of education so amazing, to where oftentimes our modern education is helping us learn something so we can pass a test, so we can get a college degree, so we can make some money. And
Nothing wrong with making money.
there's nothing wrong with any one aspect of that. If I begin with the end in mind, and that is money, you cannot serve God and
Amen.
So
Amen.
I will die soulless. And so we do need to, it's a wonderful thing. Not everyone has to have classical education. But it's a wonderful school. It's a wonderful reality. And I think all parents should think about that.
100%.
Yeah. Sorry, Sheena, I don't mean to cut across you, but I have another question for Sarah after you're done.
Yeah, no, like I've said this before on the podcast, that the stuff that, I'm learning in this moral theology class is exactly all that stuff. I never heard of any of that stuff. Like, I heard snippets, and yes, I heard about the virtues, but about the, how it affects us, who we are, how we operate, how we actually can change by creating better habits, how we, it's incumbent upon us to grow in virtue. We can't just say, well, that's just the way I am. No, we have to be constantly striving to be like Jesus in the Gospels, So, and one of the things that I've also learned recently in the catechism is that, maybe it's not the catechism, maybe it was Gaudium et Spes, but that as parents, our job is to be that bridge between our children and God when they're young. So when the catechism talks about what is the purpose, what's the end of marriage, is unity, procreation and education. It's that education. And sometimes it gets confused with the education you're talking about, but it's the education of who we are and who God is, and our role as parents is to create that bridge between them.
It's a high call.
It is a high call.
And
especially if you don't know it's a call that you have as a parent.
And you also use the dialectic method. So dialectical. What does that mean, Sarah? Can you explain that to us? And I'm sure that might have influenced your ability to actually proclaim the gospel on campus as well.
Oh, sure. So I will say, like, as a caveat, like, I don't have a classical education upbringing. I was a public school girl, most of my upbringing. But what I did learn as a teacher is, how to enter into more of a dialogue with my students. And so when I'm leading them to a point, this is the dialectical, like, learning method. When I'm leading them to a point, I'm not kind of coming from, I don't know, just overhead, me having all of the knowledge, and I'm just going to lecture and impart it to you. But I'm starting to ask questions so that we can arrive at this truth together. And it would be really similar to Socratic method, right? That you're kind of teasing things out together in a group. And it is an art. So did it help me on campus? Absolutely. But there are, like, you go to school to, like, learn how to actually, it's a pedagogy. So, like,
what does that big word mean? Pedagogy?
It means, like, a perspective from which you teach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Teaching form. Yeah,
it's like a teaching form. But yeah, like you have to kind of become a master in it in order to execute it well.
Back to it, you in the last week asked a few people, what's the meaning of life? You could instead say, hey, Mr. New Barber Man, let me tell you what the meaning of life is. Mm-hmm. And you could have just said a sentence. Totally. And you could have been very correct. You could have given the kerygma, the basic gospel message. You could have given the prologue of the catechism, John 17:3, Father, this is it. And he'd been like,
he would have just glazed
over like, okay, take a seat. It's
another nut job.
€22 when we finish, cash only. And that would have been it. But ask him, what's the meaning of life? Let that be revealed. Let that draw out of him. Because because we are body, soul composite, we have longings. And I might not come to that conclusion myself. But when I do come to that conclusion, how much greater and more convicted will I be of it when I came to it and you helped bring me, but I came to it as opposed to you just told me from above.
He like, I know enough at this stage in my life, and it's taken me this long to figure it out, that me telling him what I think is unimportant and it's irrelevant in his life and he's not interested. But me getting him to tell me what he thinks the meaning of life is will get him to think in a much more effective way, like the dialectical method that you talk about.
Yeah.
And the truth is in him. The truth is in him, and his soul is alive. He does not have deadness of soul. His soul is alive. God is alive within him, and God is at work within him. And I'm just getting him to think. You know, I'm not getting him to pray. I'm like, don't go to the. Do you pray? Yeah, I go to the church. How does that make you feel? I really like it. You know, and just getting him to think about really liking being in the church. You know, that's God at work within him, and asking questions and letting him, you know. And I'm not saying I do this all the time. I'm not saying I'm great at all, but that was a conversation I thought I'm going to talk about this at some stage on a podcast, because this is really important. And for me, this is why podcasts are really important, because we're not just blah information, giving a lecture and then saying, okay, we give a good lecture, we're happy anyway. Actually, we're breaking stuff open and we're clarifying on things that we're saying that, you know, may be misinterpreted or you know.
It's funny when you're talking about that. Something funny happened to me during the week, reading Catherine of Siena, I think it was. And so whenever I first embarked on spiritual direction a couple of years ago, and, you know, it's only starting to dawn on me, even during this conversation, that my spiritual director had taken that approach with me. You know, so tell me how, you know, and I remember reaching a pivotal point of like, oh, nobody will ever fill that hole in me except for God. And she's like, you know, and I didn't realize it at the time. It's only when we're talking now that I'm like, okay. And, you know, and if I allow God to fill that hole, I actually can love people better, right? Without wanting anything, because I actually don't need anything from anybody else, because he's filling all of that need in me. And she was so proud of me, and I was so proud of me.
Yes.
And I thought I had come up with that myself.
And you did.
But until I read Saint Catherine the other day, and I'm like, oh, she thought the same as yeah. Anyway.
Just because it's true for her doesn't mean it's any less true for
I
you.
know, but you know what I mean? Like it's like God
Absolutely.
uses his gentle pedagogy, you know, and just brings us along. Like the whole of salvation history was slow and steady. Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Amen. I have another question for you. You guys work on university campuses. We work, generally speaking, with the age group that falls before that. Okay, so we're working in the secondary schools for the most part.
And like sixth class
And
confirmation.
sixth class, we do confirmation work as well. We do some young adult work, anyway, just to throw that in there, but not on university campuses. The transition between where the demographic that we work with and the demographic that you guys work with, let me pose a question, a thought experiment. The thought experiment is this, and this is for Irish parents who are, you know, who have a Catholic faith, who've done their best to bring their kids up in the faith. The question is, if you had a choice between a spectrum of, on the one hand, your kids are going to be incredibly successful but not have faith, but unsuccessful and have no faith, and that moment in their lives where they leave the faith or become unsuccessful and maintain the faith happens in the moment they join the workforce or the moment they join the university campus. If we had to choose, and I do think we no longer have to think of it in those terms because of the work that you guys are doing.
Sorry,
But
I'm just...
sometimes Sheena hints at me under the table, but
No,
she's
I
not hinting at me under the table now. We don't have to think about it in those extreme terms because you guys are doing what you're doing on university campuses in Ireland. Thanks be to God. But if we were to ask that question, what would be the honest answer? And I actually think that that's a very healthy thing for us to think about as Catholic parents. What it comes down to, do you understand the question?
Not a clue.
To clarify, are you saying successful, faithless, unsuccessful in life, career, workforce, but
Yeah.
faithful?
So the pinnacle of success in Ireland, generally speaking, is to have a son or a daughter who's a doctor, okay? But they might have no faith. But we hold that up there as something that is really, really something to aspire to. Are we willing to sacrifice our children's soul at the altar of their success and our vicarious success through their success? Or are we willing to say, I'd rather my son or daughter to work an ordinary job, which is a good, honest job, to have excellence of soul. Is that the term you use?
Greatness.
Greatness of soul. And to be a great person, but to not have that social accolade.
I would say this is to speak to the Irish context specifically here. I think the greatest fear of an Irish parent is that their son or daughter would be different. They're so afraid. And so today, to be different would be to practice your faith. And it is really true. And I'm not passionate, but that's just the reality. If it was something, and there are other things that would make someone different in some ways, but I would say not just different, but it's in a lot of ways to practice your faith is unacceptable as a young person right now. And so that is a great fear. So sometimes an Irish parent would be more okay with whatever you want to go do, sleep around or do this or that. That is normal. That's what college students normally do. I don't want you to be ostracized. That's just dangerous.
Yeah, but that's the concern of a concerned parent who don't want their kids to be ostracized. That's not, they don't want them to have faith. They just don't want them to be different. Do you get the distinction I'm making? I'm not saying that that's not happening. I'm just saying that's, like, if we can find the root cause, then we can deal with it more effectively. And if we can normalize being faithful, that they're not exposed, different, or ostracized, then there's a better chance that having faith is acceptable at third level, which I think you guys do a great job of doing. At least you're providing a community in the campuses that you're working on. Sarah, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking we're trying. I'm not sure.
Yeah, let me throw a statistic at you. I think you're actually doing a great job. Jump in there, Sheena.
I think what you're saying is, in Ireland, we hold as parents the education in higher esteem than the faith. And it's back to what is our role as parents is to educate our children. But it's not merely academic education. And that has been lost, completely lost in society.
I'm not sure that's, I think what you're saying is, and I don't mean to disagree with you, but I think what you're saying is parents' primary concern is they don't want their kids to be weird.
Yeah, and
different or ostracized.
And I would say it's a lack of belief. It's also a different understanding of what makes me happy. And in the end, we would say our end is God. And that is my happiness. That is my blessedness. That is my beatitude. That is, people, we don't often believe that. For many reasons. Maybe that wasn't, maybe no one ever shared that. No one ever actually even shared that.
Yeah.
Or we never saw it lived. So I think probably parents want their kids to be happy. And the idea is, well, being a doctor, people look up to you. You make a good amount of money that provides freedom. And there are some human creature comforts that are wonderful that money can give you. And that even if you look at empirical data, it'll tell you, it'll make you happier.
And you tend to have a better marriage because of that. That's a good thing.
And only to a certain point. I don't know what the income thing is. Maybe it's like 60,000. It says something
starting
like,
off.
What I'm saying is the data says something like happiness is increased based on how much you make up until like 60,000. This is data, and that isn't. I'm not even fully believing.
Yeah, whatever the figure is.
I'm saying it ends, but I think that this is the belief: is that happiness revolves around this, and so, well, I just want my kid to be happy. Lack of understanding what is happiness.
I think too, if there were any Irish parents who were like listening to this or found themselves in this situation of like, yeah, I don't want my child to, what is it that you said? Like have faith, but be unsuccessful, or be successful and have no faith. Like if they're seeing the outcome of their children's lives in these kind of polarizing black and white extremes, I would say, like, what I'm learning as a mother of a 9-month-old is that a lot of kind of what I hope for Mary is more of a reflection back onto myself, like what I really think is important. And so I would just encourage those parents to ask those questions, like for themselves, like, what do I define success as? What do I think is the most valuable thing in this world? What do I hope for, like, when my life comes to an end? Like, what's the legacy that I want to leave behind? All of these things, because I think it's so easy to kind of project onto our children or other people, like, your hopes and dreams for them. But I think it takes a lot of courage to take that into your own heart and to really ask, like, what am I living my life for again? Mm-hmm. Or like, and I just really admire these. You guys are a great example of it, but I have been blown away lately by meeting people who are my parents' age, who...
Your parents are much older than us.
They are.
I'm joking.
They are. But who haven't stopped growing and learning, and who haven't stopped just asking that question for themselves. Like, their conversion is still in the works and still in the process. And I am always floored, and I always tell Sean, whenever I meet someone who's just a little bit older, has kids out of the house, and I'm like, wow, they are still kind of like turning over, what is the meaning of life, and who am I, and what am I on this earth to do? And maybe I got it wrong for the past few years, but I'm trying, and I'm at least thinking about it. And so I would just say there's a great invitation for Irish all parents, myself, to continue asking that question, you know?
Yeah. And I totally agree with you. And, you know, Sheena and myself, we're provoked in these conversations about our relationship. We're provoked in these conversations about our faith. We're provoked about our parenting, you know, and we're reminded of stuff that we aspired to years ago that we still aspire to, but we forgot. And so it's really helpful to have conversations like this that actually remind us. But, you know, Sarah, you mentioned something earlier on, you know, we're trying, you know, just because everybody on campus that you work in isn't having an on-the-spot conversion doesn't mean to say that, you know, you guys aren't having a massive impact. And let me remind you of the metrics of the early church. You know, we have the saying that was Tertullian said that the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. And we have this idea that we arrived at widespread Christianity across the Western world like that. Didn't happen like that. You know, and if you take the Council of Nicaea happened in the year 324, I think it was, and there were 1,800 bishops that weren't there at the Council of Nicaea, but they were there, they were invited to come, and 300 or so of them actually came. And we have the Nicene Creed that we recite at Mass from the Council of Nicaea. But if you take the 12 apostles and the people who were converted, you know, there were 11, and then they drew lots for the 12th again. And if you take the people who were converted by Peter, you know, that we know of in the Acts of the Apostles, you know, there was a 5,000 number and an 8,000 number. And you assume that the ratio between the number of apostles, or the bishops, and the number of faithful is rough and tumble about the same as that which was in the Council of Nicaea 300 years later.
Yeah.
What do you think the rate of growth in the church, in the early church, was?
No clue.
That's okay. That's the answer everybody gives. Sean, what do you think the rate of growth is?
I don't know.
Give me a figure. You got to give a figure. Annualized rate of growth. Exponential.
You said something like, oh, you said.
I didn't say it. I didn't say the figure.
Yeah.
So you're
5,000 a year.
So 5,000% a year.
Oh, 5,000% a year. Oh no, percentage. 12 exponential percentages. Wonderful. So let's go 200%.
200% a year. Sarah.
85%.
So 85%. So if you had 100 in year one, you'd have 185 in year two.
Yep.
And then you would have another 85% over 185, and you go on from there.
Yep.
Sheena, what would you say it is?
25%.
25% annualized rate.
I
of growth.
haven't a clue.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
just
okay.
saying a
I'm
number.
not saying that to make me look smart and you guys look anything other than smart. And this is to, let me just, before I give you the figure, say the reason I'm asking this question. And this is very important for us as missionaries or working in the missionary field. We have to fight against the idea, both at a parish level, at a university level, at a school level, for us on a mission level, that when we walk into the room, everybody is going to drop down with the power of the Holy Spirit and have a conversion on the spot and give the rest of their lives to Jesus.
Sure.
Because that's not what, and it would be great if that happened. Mm-hmm. But I'm not Moses, and, Moses ain't here. So we have to fight that in our heads, because the annualized rate of growth in the first 300 years of the church, and I ran the numbers myself, I'm an accountant myself, and I'm like, surely this can't be right. So I got a maths professor to look over it, and then a maths teacher, because I'm like, he could be wrong. And then I got a maths teacher to check it out as well. It's actually 1.4% growth per year.
Wow.
Huh.
Annualized. So what does that mean? It means that in the first 300 years of the church doubled in size every 40 years. So when we walk into campus, you guys have this, a model where, one missionary works with 2 people. Our model is one missionary works with 3. We call them Peter, James, and John. So everybody has to have 3 people that they're working with all the time. Yep. And if those 3 people then the following year go on and whatever, the rate of growth in the early church was 1.4%, and it doubled every 40 years. And so this is like, we've got to get out of this Christendom mindset whereby we're converting Ireland. No, we're not converting Ireland. We're converting each individual soul, one conversation at a time, one invitation at a time. And that is our responsibility.
You alluded to this. One of you alluded to this earlier. Would I be right in saying that earlier over dinner? That that was one of the problems that you came up with in Ireland, is that there's a perception there that you should be able to bring loads of people. No, maybe I'm forgetting.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Anyway, yeah. So usually the last question we ask is like, is there something in particular that the Lord's stirring up in your heart at the moment, or something you've read recently that has been like, that you'd like to share with people, or something in your prayer time? Or
go ahead, Jen.
Sure, I can share. I already shared about how I've been praying so much about death, and
remember she said she was intense.
Yeah, death. But maybe one thing, I've been really inspired by is I was listening to a podcast actually where Father Dave Pavanka, who's the president of Franciscan University, was being interviewed. And he was talking about his father passing away. It was just, heart-wrenching even just to hear him talk. But he was saying that some of his father's last words as he was on his deathbed, he turned to his son, who's now Father Dave Pavanka, and said, well, this is what I've waited my whole life for. Jesus will finally present me to the Father. And that, just those words, I think, like, in hearing that story, I have been praying about that for 2 weeks now. And Father Dave Pavanka actually was so inspired by these words that he made a small video series called My Father's Father. So I just started watching the first episode, and I don't really consume a lot of media. It takes a lot for me actually to open my computer and look something up, and I had to create an account and everything. But this is beautiful. It's well done. It's beautiful. And it's made me think so much about that reality. Am I ready to meet the Father when I die and go to heaven, God willing? So anyways, that's what I've been thinking about. Death, the Father, and gratitude for Father Dave Pavanka.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Go ahead, Sean.
Thanks, Sarah.
I saw that podcast too.
Oh,
yeah, it's amazing.
It was brilliant.
Yeah.
Saint Teresa of Avila. we are reading in our class that we're in right now, and there was one of two books that we could slowly go through for the whole semester. I don't know which one you chose, whether it's her or St. Francis of Sales. She was, in what I was reading a couple days ago, she was telling her sisters about the importance of mental prayer, or sometimes in some traditions contemplation, but this time, dedicated time of intentional conversation with Jesus in prayer. Silence, not just me petitioning, asking God for something, not just me praising God for something, not just me saying some vocal prayer out loud, but dedicated time of silence and me, conversation, dialogue with God. And this is something that we make a commitment to in Focus. We make a commitment to a daily holy hour. We make a commitment to spending considerable amount of time in mental prayer, and something that I have failed in staying committed to, and being a father and letting things go and work schedule, and didn't quite get my holy hour here. And people, I've been telling my missionaries who are wonderful, and they ask me and they check on me, and I've been telling them this struggle for a year and a half. And I just see the amazing high call and the amazing goodness of giving God intentional time. This has been on my mind.
Yeah, I'll go really quick. We'll make it really quick because the baby's crying. I would say that it's listening to God within me, so that I can hear him without. So like, what is he saying to me within, so I can hear him, to confirm what it is he's saying to me without, in his revealed word and in the Gospels, and, to not just take in what he's saying to me through the intellect, but also through my heart. What would you say, Sheena?
I have so many things that are going on at the moment. I think, that whole notion of, the seed that has been planted within us is actually God within us. That's something that I don't think I ever heard before, that God is in me. Yes, I've heard it in like platitudes, but not in a real concrete way. God is actually in me. He lives in me. With it's just blowing my mind. And any call to prayer, is him inviting me to prayer. It's not my, it's not my greatness, it's God's greatness, and it's my response. But it's always him who's inviting me first, because he lives within me. Yeah. I'm still unpacking it, to be honest. There's a lot of getting there with that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Thank you so much for your time, and for bringing your wife and beautiful daughter up here to Donegal.
Absolutely.
And we appreciate
God bless
the
your
conversation.
mission.
Thank you. Great to be with you all.
Thank you. God bless.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. It's free. Share with your family and friends. Enjoy.